let's take a deeper dive into Asia's economic outlook, and I want to bring in Edward Tse. He is the founder and CEO of Gaofeng Company. Edward, great to have you back. I appreciate it. Now,
thank you, John.
It seems as though it is impossible to talk about the global economy right now without discussing the crisis in Ukraine. How is the ongoing fighting affecting Asia?
Yeah, I think there's certainly has created a lot of uncertainty in the region. People are obviously watching the war every day, and people are really concerned about what will come out. But from an economic standpoint, people are very concerned about the implications of the war to the region, in particular in terms of potential inflation, because Ukraine is and Russia as well, is an exporter of many of the major commodities to the region, like agriculture products, food, and so on.
Yeah, you know, you used a couple of words there, anxiety and global implications. Which countries in Asia do you think could be affected greatest, and how is this anxiety affecting people? Are they worried about the other shoe dropping? When is the economy really going to take a hit?
I think it depends. Certainly, China is very much involved, for right or for wrong, from a geopolitical standpoint. So China is very much involved, quote unquote, from many analysts' point of view. But at the same time, you know, major economies such as India, Pakistan, they're also very much involved because the trade relationship between these countries with Russia and Ukraine are also very significant. And one also do not sort of underestimate the impact on Southeast Asia in general as a region, because that region has been coming out from the COVID a little bit, and they were looking for some degree of recovery, but now the war is putting a damper on that as well.
You know, you talked about it earlier, and much has been made about the amount of grain that comes from Ukraine and Russia, the breadbasket of Europe. But we are seeing parts of Asia, as you mentioned, affected, and some nations, Egypt for one, are limiting exports, worried about shortages that will come in a matter of months. How is this affecting the global economy, and especially Asia?
I think, you know, many countries are going to look at, you know, protectionism as a way to protect their own interests, and that's not good for globalization, for global trade, you know, as you know.
Can you expand on that just a bit more? How could it affect Asia per se?
Yeah, I think the Asian countries actually has been trading with you know, other countries in the world in a significant way, including with Russia and the Ukraine. And with the war, the implication is that, you know, people are expecting that perhaps, you know, we won't get as much as imports from these countries in terms of energy, in terms of food, agriculture products, and so on. So people need to hunker down and try to protect their own interests.
You know, Edward, I talked about it leading into you, that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development sees the Philippines as a strong growth potential, as much as 7% this year. This despite the ongoing pandemic. Why is the Philippines looking so strong right now?
Well, the Philippines is, as you know, it has over 100 million people. So it's a large country from the standpoint of the population. It's also a pretty young population. You know, many of the people are young generation, and they're very, you know, they're very digitally savvy. They pick up a lot of new ideas and new habits in the digital economy. So I say, you know, over the years, actually, the Philippines has been growing pretty well. Not only this year, but the Philippines has been on the upswing for the last several years already.
Yeah, and I guess infrastructure as well, a lot of activity going on there as well?
Correct, that's right.
Yeah, and what does the OECD have to say about China's economy? After decades of massive growth, 10% growth or better, what is China facing right now?
Well, I think, as you know, we talked about already briefly, you know, China is somewhat pulled into the geopolitics, so people are very concerned about the outlook on the economic situation in China. As you know, just in the recent two sessions, Premier Liu Keqiang has given his work report, and in that work report, firstly, he has reported that last year China has grown its GDP for 8.1%, which is very, very good number, as you know. And Premier Li also predicted for this year, China is going to grow another 5.5%, which is close to the OECD prediction. I think OECD predicts around what 5.1%.
Right.
So which is roughly around the same time. But I think as Premier Lee underscored, this year China, as well as many other countries, is in the midst of a lot of geopolitical uncertainty and instability, actually. And therefore, the major theme for China's economic management for this year is going to be focused on stability to make sure that things won't go out of control too much. So 5.5% or 5.1% is pretty good within that context.
One would argue very good. Edward, we only have just a few seconds, but could you tell me the concern that the possibility of global inflation, how could that affect Asia, and especially China, such a key to the global economic activities?
It's a big deal, because of the war. For the reason that we already talked about, people in Asia are very concerned about inflation. People in China also concerned about inflation. Although over the last couple of years, China has managed inflation very, very well. Actually, has kept inflation to be very low level. But at the same time, with the war, people are very concerned that perhaps some of these would begin to increase. The inflation rate would perhaps going to increase, and that's not good for China as well as for the region.
Edward Tse, always appreciate your insight. The founder and CEO of Gaofeng Company. Thank you so much.